Hey you guys, welcome back. Grind Time Week 6, Derek and Josiah. We have a really meaningful topic we want to talk about with you this week. Do you feel a little bit lost? Do you feel not motivated? Do you feel like you don't have the energy, the drive to accomplish your goals? The week the week before we spoke about goals. Do you not feel like you have that energy, that drive to go after what you want? Well, we're going to talk about some of the wiring in your brain and what causes that. And there's this one neurotransmitter that's really important to your levels of happiness, your levels of drive, and your levels of motivation. And that neurotransmitter is called dopamine. So Josiah is going to lay out some facts about dopamine and the role it plays in your brain. And then we're going to talk about some questions, have a little bit of discussion, and talk about just how important it is, and some things that we can do and you can do, things we're already doing, things that you might, help you out to optimize your dopamine levels and live happily and successfully. So what facts do we want to hit on right now, Josiah?
Yeah, so you may be wondering, what is dopamine? Well, dopamine is a neurotransmitter that our brain produces to stimulate us to do something. The functions of dopamine is to the reward motivation, motor function, and compulsion, amongst other things. What dopamine impacts, right? So we're talking about reward motivated behaviors. Dopamine levels impact mood regulation, muscle movement, sleep patterns, ability to store and recall memories, concentration, appetite, and the ability to express self-control. The ways that dopamine plays a role, perhaps in addictions, I have an example here too. When you experience pleasure too often, you fall into what's called a dopamine deficit, which we'll talk about later. But an example may be how a smoker, he or she needs more hits to get buzzed or high. If he or she uses frequently. Another fact, a fun fact to go along with addiction is it takes 3 months with any addiction. It takes 3 months for your dopamine levels to return back to normal once you quit overindulging in any certain pleasure. It could be smoking. It could be a different drug. It could be your addiction towards anything, being on your phone, whatever may release that dopamine for you. And this can lead, the smoking, needing it more can actually lead to depression. It leads to depression and anxiety. It's been proven. I don't know if any of you out there have experience this. Once you are overstimulated, pleasured, or overindulged, your dopamine levels become lower and lower as past pleasures become minuscule compared to how they make you feel now. So basically saying, the more you overindulge, the less happier you're going to feel doing those things. Lastly, just a couple of natural dopamine stimulants, just ways that you can kind of release that dopamine and tilt. For instance, if there was a scale, like a weighing scale, like a teeter-totter of pain and pleasure, what happens is, from what I've heard it say from other neuroscientists out there, is that when you indulge in pleasure, actually it's like a teeter-totter in your brain, and it actually releases the dopamine and it tilts more to the pleasure side. But if you tilt too far and you overindulge for too often, too many times, it actually doesn't return to balance. It actually goes to the pain side, the deficit side. And so now you're at a deficit, and now it's harder to retain that homeostasis, that levelness. Yeah. So you go, smoker needs
So it's like
2 cigarettes, 3 cigarettes, 4 cigarettes, a pack, 2 packs a day. Boom. Slams on the other side. Depression, anxiety. And that's what that's...
Well, and that's kind of going back real quick. Just want to interrupt.
Yep.
That's going back to the title of our video, where when that teeter-totter slams is when you lose control.
Yeah.
That's when you're not in control.
Right.
And that's where almost the addiction side of it kind of comes in. Am I correct there? Where the addiction side comes in, where is too much of a good thing bad? Well, clearly, yes.
That's right. I totally agree. That's a good point, observation. Just lastly, real quick, the stimulants are naturally exercise, sleep, music, meditation, and sunlight. Those are just a few facts just to get this video started.
So those are natural things that release dopamine?
Yes.
Just say those one more time, just in case they didn't catch it.
Exercise, sleep, music, meditation, sunlight. You could say reading. You could say, a lot of jogging, exercise. Yeah, so we have some questions, but before we talk about this more in depth and our own experiences and whatnot, we do want to disclose we are not neuroscientists. We've been keeping up with the latest on dopamine for, only a few months now, but so we know nothing compared to someone who has, their degree and they've been doing this for 30 years studying this stuff. We don't see ourselves at all at that point. But, however, we take advantage of the information that we are given from people who are much smarter than us, who have researched topics like this much more than us. If you wanted to change your you wanted, an outlet put in, you probably wouldn't do it yourself. If you didn't know how to do it, you wouldn't start ripping apart wires, would you?
Or putting a new roof on your house.
Right.
If you didn't know what you were doing. Yeah.
Right. You'd call someone.
An expert.
Or at least you'd watch a YouTube video on it. Right? Hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully you know.
But this is where we're taking some facts. We're taking, what we know from the experts and kind of compressing it down, throwing some real world experience in it, and making it really digestible and palatable to help you guys really understand the effects of dopamine. And hopefully you can get some value and get some points out of this video that you can apply to your life. And, kind of like us, you may not be an expert in the field. You may not know everything there is to know because you haven't spent 20 years in the field. Yeah. But, you reach a point, and there's certain real world experience that we all have, and me and Josiah have especially, where once you get a hold of that information, it's really easy for you to start to connect the dots. Mm-hmm. You get that info and you're like, this is why this happens to me. Yeah. This is why I felt like this. This is why I couldn't stop doing this. And now this is why I can. So, that knowledge is power, kind of belief structure is really true here, where the more you know, it's easier to connect those dots and then make that change that you need to happen and have that paradigm shift.
Yes.
So what question do we want to answer off the bat?
So, what we're about to talk about is stuff that we have experienced and that it has been tested and tried. Okay, we're not just blabbing about some crap we found online. We're not just hanging on to some theory and some garbage. No, this is stuff we are telling you because we know that it works. And it's changed our lives for the better.
Absolutely.
100%. So the first question we're going to both kind of answer. We'll go through a couple questions here, just see what we can do here. Why is it hard to quit an addiction? That's a good question. We also have how and why do you keep your dopamine levels in check? So Derek, maybe if you just want to start by talking about one of the questions.
So like how and why to keep your dopamine levels in check. Well, why do you want to keep your dopamine levels in check? Well, first off, it's going to optimize, your quality of life and your state of being. And why do you want to keep your dopamine levels in check? Because it's going to feel like you're in control. Going back to kind of the title of our video, is in being intentional and feeling like you have that control over your life. People are the most depressed and dissatisfied when they feel like they don't have control over their life. When you feel like you are in control and you're making calculated strategic decisions, you feel a lot more calm, you feel a lot more at peace, and your dopamine levels are most likely in check. And how do you keep your dopamine levels in check? Well, there's so many variables where it's not one thing. It's a lot of things.
Yeah.
A huge thing I know personally for me, we're in a part of the country where we experience all 4 seasons. And in the wintertime, it's really important for me to supplement with vitamin D and get a lot of vitamin D and get as much sunlight as you can. I know in the summertime when I'm out at the beach or something on an off day and I'm soaking up sun, I feel fantastic. I feel amazing. So enough sunlight is crucial, enough vitamin D3. Sleep and diet are probably the foundation, the foundation. We've talked about this in previous videos. Sleep, diet, exercise, and now kind of pulling that all together is being consistent with it. Being kind of structured and having a schedule that your body follows, you can get into a really good pattern and a really good rhythm when your body kind of knows what to expect. If some days you sleep till 11:30 and other days you're up at 6:30 and other days you're somewhere in between, your body really doesn't know what the hell's going on, and your hormone levels and your dopamine levels are going to be all off kilter.
That's true. So consistency, you're saying, maybe, being consistent with your schedule,
right,
and not throwing your dopamine levels and like crazy.
Exactly.
Okay. So that's definitely good. Yeah.
And Josiah, what are some things that can kind of spike your dopamine levels? Things maybe you should stay away from or be, use in moderation.
So, to go off of the question, I guess that you answered there, why care and how do you keep your dopamine levels in check? So dopamine levels in check. So basically you don't want to overindulge in certain pleasures. Now, it's not up to me to tell you what's good for you.
Right.
I can only tell me what's good for me, and I know what's not good for me. I know that drugs, alcohol, nicotine, tobacco, anything like that is not good for me. Alcohol is not good for you. Maybe a glass of wine a day may, keep the doctor away in some fantasy world or whatever. But, I'll have a glass of wine, when I feel like it, but I don't usually feel like it. But that's just me. You may be completely different. You may be, maybe it's harder to not overindulge in a couple of those things, and maybe you don't feel indulged in any of that. Maybe you never did any of those things. Maybe you feel more indulged in running, and you just got a problem where you cannot stop running every minute that you're free. I know there's people out there who are
cyclists
who are skin and bone, who get high off of running, and they're addicted, and they have a problem. And some of them may know it. Some
and are there a lot worse things you could be doing? Sure. But if you're taking time, maybe away from your friends and family.
But my point is we're talking about how do you keep your dopamine levels in check. Like I said, and this was explained to me, it's like a teeter-totter of pleasure and the deficit, the pain and pleasure, right, in your brain. And the more that dopamine is released, the more you experience pleasure. But when you overindulge, it doesn't return to that homeostasis leveling balance. Okay?
So is it like almost you spike that dopamine, you get all this pleasure, but as soon as that dopamine goes away, now you're in a deficit and you're not getting back to that baseline, that healthy line of dopamine.
Yeah, it's kind of like that.
Yeah, okay,
Yep. And that's with anything. Okay, so we're not just talking about drugs, like I explained. And why should you care about that? Well, interesting you ask. Because let's say you've been overindulging in X, Y, and Z. Maybe your whole life, maybe just recently and you're trying to quit, okay? And we're going to get into the next question about addiction. So I don't want to answer this too much. But why should you care? Because this is the secret behind quitting any addiction you have. This is the untold secret. I was never taught this. I had to find this. I stumbled upon this. If I didn't stumble upon this, I don't know where I'd be right now. I would probably be in a different state of mind. I would probably not be enjoying simple things. I would need greater stimulant in my life to be happy. And there's a lot of ways that dopamine and just knowing the stuff that we're talking about is crucial, and it's life changing. So we hope that you stick around, because we're gonna answer another question that's really serious stuff. I guess I could jump right into it if you don't have anything else.
Yeah, well, I kind of, just real quick, what you were saying about addiction and not knowing this information is, if you don't know how to take back control of your life, it's so easy just to feel like a victim. You know, it's so easy to just kind of feel like, instead of taking control and being like, okay, I've made my choices to do these things because of this decision, this happened because of this. It's when you don't have that perspective and you don't take that onus, when you don't have the information and the knowledge, that's when you become a victim and you feel like the world's against you. You know, it's like, I can't get ahead because I have this addiction, because I can't quit doing this, because I'm just this way. I've always been this way. No, that's just how you're wired right now. And if you just tweaked a few things, you could optimize your life and you could be in a much better place, mentally. And then that'll transition to your relationships, your career, your finances, everywhere.
That's funny you say that, because one of the neuroscientists that we've been listening to, actually talks about how we're living in a dopaminergic.
Yeah, that's right. It's a
dopaminergic society. Yeah. They talk about how we're always in a rush. We're always running and gunning, and we're so stimulated. We're in such a stimulated society where there's billboards and there's crap everywhere in your face and your phone, and
you just never get a break.
Boys and there's men. It's just no. And when you experience what it's like to have the homeostasis that your mind is supposed to be in, when you don't overindulge in sugar, when you don't overindulge in coffee, drugs, alcohol, reading, simple pleasures. I love to read, but I'm not going to be reading for 6 hours when I know I should start studying. Or I should go to work out. And now, also, if I genuinely do release the pleasure, the dopamine is released from reading a book. If I seriously get that, which some people do, and it's actually proven that women like I think it's like these fantasy, dramatic fantasy,
or like romance novels.
Yeah, and they actually like that releases a lot of dopamine, and they really enjoy that, and they so that can be a realistic thing for some people that just another
depending on how you're wired, and yourself best, so
right.
you're gonna know what things you might be overindulging in too much, and it could be hurting you. You want to be happy. You want to be able to be in a state of happiness and calmness and joy, no matter what the environment's like.
Yeah.
But if you're dependent on something, I can only socialize with my friends if we're drinking.
Yeah.
I can only, relax. I can only fall asleep if I,
right.
do this.
Right.
And so now you're letting one simple thing control the outcome, where you can't let yourself get into that state of mind. So you really just got to take back control of your life, but you got to know why your brain is doing these things and how to take back that control. So what's this question that we want to hit on? Because we don't have a whole lot of time left, but we want to hit on this real quick.
So why is it hard to quit an addiction? And this is really serious. This is really serious because it hits home with us. We've experienced addictions in our past and present, and it is, everyone is addicted to something. Okay, we everyone knows that, but it's the perpetual existence. It's the like seeking towards a better way of life, and that's what Grind Time here is all about.
And it's always about getting 1% better every day.
Right.
We're not stagnant. We're always getting better.
And so what today may seem like to be an addiction or a leftover of an addiction, something you're in control of, but because you're not doing it every day or whatever, but it's still there and you don't want it there completely, maybe. That's just part of life. But in a little bit, I'll tell you what, if you can hone in on this skill, the knowledge, the returning back to homeostasis, the saying, okay, well, Josiah, Derek, how do I quit my addiction then with this simple, neurotransmitter? Well, we're going to talk about that right now. Why is it hard to quit, and how do you quit? Right? So I guess I'll start by saying it's hard to quit because you're messing with your head. You're telling yourself, oh, this feels good. This is good. And then your brain is saying, I'm depressed, stop doing this. And you keep doing it, and you're traumatizing yourself.
Right.
Into depression state.
And that's where that borderline, becomes from something
It's like a bad toxic relationship.
It literally, and it goes from pleasure to pain, where it's like your consciousness or your subconscious maybe knows I really don't want to do this thing, but your body is like still pulling you towards it. The easiest example is nicotine. For anybody who's a vapor or a smoker, these influencers and everybody and things you see on TV, they want you to think that vaping is better than smoking cigarettes.
No, nicotine is actually statistically, there's a chart that I've done a little research here.
Yeah.
Dopamine is released most in nicotine.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's probably why it's more addictive than cocaine then.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
it
literally.
Is.
And I think everybody can relate to that. Because we just looked this up the other day. 1 in 3 Americans are addicted to nicotine.
Yeah. Smoke cigarettes.
Smoke cigarettes.
Yeah.
So probably 1 in 2.
Yeah, probably at least half to.
But between dippers and vapors and all that stuff, So, so how to quit? What I'm going to be honest with you, I was addicted to nicotine, and there's like this thing with like AA, like Alcoholics Anonymous, like always once an addict, always an addict, like whatever. I don't like getting into that sort of stuff. Whatever. I use nicotine since I was, and that's part of it. Is the younger you get into this stuff, is then the harder it's going to be to quit it later. So like I started using nicotine when I was like 13, 14 years old, and then used it all through high school and up until now. So a long time. But I always had to keep trying to quit. I didn't give up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like a lot of people, when they have a bad habit, they sometimes just give in. And they're like, well, I guess this is who I am now.
Oh, yeah.
No.
Oh, yeah.
No, you fight that demon and you get it out. I probably quit dozens of times.
Yeah.
And it was just a day. And then it would be a week. And then I'd go like 10 days, and then I'm back on it again. And then I'm on it every day for 6 months. Then we quit again for 2-3 days. Yeah. But you're always doing it. Yeah. And it's like pulling a rubber band and you just pull it, and sometimes it snaps back, and you pull it, and it snaps back, but all it takes is one time for it to break.
Yeah.
And then it's gone.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
You know?
Yeah, take it one step at a time. But what's funny about dopamine is that it takes no willpower to quit an addiction if you know what dopamine is doing in your life. Because if you know, well, then it's just obvious.
And then you're just using logic.
You just use your brain.
There's no emotion
to play the game. It's like a game of chess. You already won, baby, because you got the information.
Mm-hmm.
You got the brains, okay?
Yeah.
You know, you're not just a good-looking man or woman. You got the brains now, too. Now you can tell yourself, you know what? What a fool I've been.
And then you just...
I have been tricked by my own brain.
And you just almost laugh at yourself.
By society, by my own brain, whatever, into thinking that I actually needed the pleasure, the overindulgence of pleasure that actually brought me so much pain.
Right.
In problems.
Right. Yeah.
So how can we... we don't have time. So we're gonna have to do a part 2 some other time of dopamine and the effects. And, you know, maybe leave in the comments. Please comment.
Stay tuned for part 2. All right, welcome to part 2. Sorry, had a little technical difficulties. The video got cut short there. But we were just answering a few questions about dopamine. So, I believe, Josiah, you were hitting on, you know, what do we got to do to break this addiction? Yeah. And I think you were talking about how the value of knowing why your brain does certain things, once you understand it, it's so much easier to change it.
Right. And I think, you know, every time we've, you know, maybe tried to quit an addiction or a substance or whatever it is in our lives, I think that, you know, we've came across the problem of running out of willpower. Running out of strength, the strength to say no to something. And what dopamine does, once you know about it, it exposes the lie of you have to do this out of your own willpower, and you have to gut up the strength to say no to something. And it's more of just letting go and saying yes to something else. And I think that something else is dopamine.
That's very powerful.
So
no, that's like very powerful. It's you're not mustering up the willpower to say no to something. You're just simply letting go, and you're saying yes to something else.
Sure.
That's a beautiful way to say it. And that's just, you know, you're going back to kind of our thesis and our motto and why we're here is we're always leveling up. We're always getting 1% better every day. And we want you guys to listen to this. I mean, you've probably listened to, you know, several podcasts, people talking about this. Joe Rogan has had people on his podcast. Another great one is Andrew Huberman. There's a lot of people out there that talk about this information, but we want to kind of give you some real world experience on it, because a lot of those guys, they can give testimonials and things. We're every average day guys. You know, we're very successful for our age, but we're everyday people. But we want to give you that real world experience. You know, it's hard to relate to someone who's a multimillionaire or someone who has a PhD from some university. But you're not alone. There are things that you're going through every day that millions of people are going through. Yeah. But when you have this information and you see other people and their successes, it's so much easier to just give yourself that confidence boost and know that it's possible to change and know that it's possible to get better every day. You should not be the same person you were last week, last month, last year. You should always be leveling up and getting better. And when you're intentional about that, it's so easy to see that progression line, you know, moving forward. And it's not a linear line. There's going to be dips and valleys, but the overall trajectory is always upward. And you need to optimize your dopamine levels, you need to develop healthy habits, and you need to cut out the things that are hurting you. If you would sit down and just think for 5 or 10 minutes about the things that are really hurting you and the things you could change, you could come up with them really quickly.
Yep.
And if you've never done that before, it's gonna be sad. It's gonna hurt. yourself to really be vulnerable and recognize those things. But when that emotion is involved, that's when the breakthroughs happen. When you get emotionally involved and when you're really honest with yourself about where you're at and where you want to go. And the hardest part is just thinking about it and being intentional and, soaking up the proper information. Maybe instead of listening to rap music, and some of this rap culture is so destructive to young men and people in general, but instead of soaking that stuff up when you're driving in your car, maybe you throw in a podcast and you learn something.
Yep.
Little things. But it's all about leveling up. Closing notes, is there anything you want to hit on, Josiah?
I no new information, but I just, if you guys like this kind of content, we're going to keep making it, but, to be honest, but if you like specifically dopamine related content, maybe we can discuss other things. Let us know in the comments, please. We'd love for you guys to be more interactive with the channel and with us, because we don't just see you as like a number, we see you as a person, a viewer, someone who's supporting and contributing to the channel. We don't think that like we own this and that, and we're like, we're working together here. We're giving you guys some information, and we'd like to get some feedback. What do you guys want to see and stuff? Also, please subscribe.
Yeah.
Share the video with someone who may need it.
Right.
And you can email us in the description. We got our email there. dl.jg
dl.jg
productions@gmail.com.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
So feel free to email us. Let us know what you're going through, and maybe we can help you out.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're starting to get on that curve where we're seeing our likes are going up, our viewership is going up, and we really appreciate it, you guys. But we really do want to build a sense of community. And we want, if you have some questions, some topics you want us to hit on, let us know. Also, we kind of have our comical side of things, our current events, which is a little bit more fun, a little bit more playful. If there's any articles that you think we should hit on, that you think would be funny to kind of talk about, send that our way too. But thank you guys again, and I'm sure we're going to be talking more about this topic in the future. But I hope this video brought you some value. So
absolutely.